Chapter 1. The Scent of Liniment and Shame. The infirmary smelled like giving up. It was a sharp, biting scent, a mix of bleach, old sweat, and the damp, earthy odor of wolfsbane. Arya Vale kept her head down, her slender fingers moving with practiced speed. She stitched a gash on a pack warrior's arm, her movements precise, clean, and utterly invisible. To be unseen, to be unheard, to be unnoticed, that was her only goal. It was the only way for an Omega to survive in the Red Moon Pack. Her world was a place of quiet service and loud humiliation, and she had long ago accepted that love and justice were not meant for her. Sloppy. A voice snapped, sharp as a whip. Arya's shoulders tensed. She didn't need to look up. She knew that voice. Lyra, the Pack's head enforcer, stood over her. Lyra was all sharp angles and a cruel, smug scent of ozone. "Did you hear me, Omega? Your stitching is as weak as your bloodline," Lyra sneered. She tapped the warrior's arm, earning a wince. "You're pulling it too tight. You'll scare him. Not that a worthless grunt like Jorin matters much." Arya flinched, but kept her hand steady. "My apologies, enforcer." Her voice was a wisp, barely audible. "Apologies," Lyra scoffed, a harsh laugh. "That's all your kind is good for. Apologies and taking up space." Lyra leaned closer, lowering her voice so only Arya could hear the venom. "My great-aunt remembers your mother. She was the same. Always thought she was special." The word was spat like a curse. Always trying to heal things that weren't her business. Look where it got her. Dirt. Just dirt and a pathetic daughter. The old, familiar ache tightened Arya's chest. Her mother. The wound that never healed. She remembered a broken body, a cold pyre, and the Pack Alpha declaring it a tragic accident. Arya knew better. You didn't get that many broken bones from falling into a ravine. You got them from a beating. But she said nothing. She couldn't. Because she was an Omega, silence was her only shield. Jorin, the warrior, grunted from the cot. "It's fine, Lyra. She's doing good." Lyra rounded on him. "You'll be silent, Jorin. Or, do you want to be on latrine duty until the next full moon? Letting an Omega touch you has made you soft." Jorin wisely shut his mouth. Arya tied off the final stitch. Her hands were trembling now, but not from fear. It was rage. A cold, buried rage that had nowhere to go. She wanted to scream. She wanted to tell Lyra that her mother had been worth 10 of her. She wanted to ask Jorin why his wound felt so cold, why a simple rogue's claw mark refused to heal properly, why it seemed to drain the warmth from her very fingers as she worked. This was the third one this month, and it felt like a silent sickness was spreading through the lower ranks. But she swallowed it all, just as she always did. She was powerless, and she knew it. "Clean this up," Lyra commanded, tossing a bloody rag onto Arya's clean supply tray. "And try not to contaminate the rest of the infirmary with your presence." Arya picked up the rag, the humiliation burning hot in her cheeks. She focused on the task, on the simple, physical act of cleaning. She would survive this. She would go to her tiny room in the Omega barracks. She would be invisible. That was the plan. A sudden, jarring noise shattered the oppressive quiet. It wasn't a howl. It was metal. A loud, piercing alarm blared from the watchtower, a sound Arya had only heard in drills. It was a rogue alarm, not a border skirmish. A breach. Chaos erupted. Betas shouted orders. Warriors, even the injured, grabbed for their weapons. "Omega!" Lyra barked, her smugness replaced by a sharp edge of panic. "Bunkers. Now. Don't get in the way." Arya nodded, her heart hammering against her ribs. She started moving toward the shelter, just as she was told. She wanted only to survive unnoticed. But as she moved, the memory of her mother's face, pale, broken, and alone, flashed in her mind. The smell of bleach and shame was instantly replaced by the metallic tang of fear. Chapter 2. The Fire in the Forest. All Omegas to the shelter. "Move. Move." A beta warrior bellowed, shoving a group of frightened pack members toward the reinforced doors beneath the mess hall. Arya was swept along with them, a leaf in a frantic current. Her mind screamed at her to obey. Go underground. Be safe. Be invisible. It was Omega's duty. It was her only duty. But as she reached the steel-plated entrance, a scream cut through the din of the alarm. It wasn't a scream of panic. It was a scream of agony, and it came from outside the walls. From the forest. She stopped. The Omega behind her slammed into her back. "Keep moving." Arya stood frozen, her blood turning to ice. She saw it all again, the memory that haunted her nights. Her mother, lying in the snow at the base of the ravine. She had been collecting herbs, they said. Arya, just a child, had found her. She had run for help, but the warriors had taken their time. It's just an omega, one had said, laughing. The cold already took her. Her mother had died alone, listening to the laughter of the men who were supposed to protect her. No, Arya whispered, the word a puff of steam in the sudden cold. She would not let it happen again. She refused to watch others die, just like her mother did. As a result of that long-buried vow, her feet moved before her brain could stop them. She broke from the line, ducking under the arm of the beta guard. Hey, you, get back here, he roared. Arya didn't listen. She was small and she was fast. She knew how to be unseen, and she used that skill now, slipping through the shadows of the compound. She darted past the armory, past the training yard, and squeezed through a loose panel in the eastern fence, a spot she used to sneak out and find quiet. She ran. She ran because the memory of her mother's stillness was more terrifying than any rogue. The forest air burned her lungs. Pine needles and damp earth slicked under her worn boots. The alarm was fainter here, muffled by the thick trunks of the whispering pines. But the sounds of a fight were clearer. The clash of steel, which was wrong, rogues used claws, and the snarls of wolves. And beneath it, a scent. Smoke. Not wood smoke. Something chemical. Oily. She pushed through a thicket of ferns, her heart trying to escape her chest. What was she doing? She was an omega. She had no claws to speak of, no warrior training. She was a healer. A stitcher of wounds. What could she possibly do? What if it's someone like me? The thought propelled her forward. What if it's someone nobody else will bother to save? Then she saw it. Through the trees, a clearing. And in the clearing, a nightmare. A carriage, massive and black with gold trim, was engulfed in flames. The crest on the door, a roaring wolf's head crowned in silver, was melting, but she recognized it. The royal crest. This was not a pack carriage. This was from the Alpha King. For bodies of royal guards were strewn on the ground, their silver-inlaid armor torn open. And circling the wreckage were 3 massive rogues. But they weren't the starved, frantic outcasts she was used to seeing. They were huge, disciplined, and moved with a terrifying silence. Their eyes glowed with a faint, cold blue light. They were cornering someone. A figure, slumped against a burning wheel. He was small. Frail. An old man. One of the rogues lunged, its claws extended. No! The scream ripped from Arya's throat before she could stop it. All 3 rogues had snapped toward her, their cold, blue eyes fixed on her. And in that moment, Arya knew she had just traded her invisible, painful life for a very sudden, very violent death. The rogues were still there, circling, and they were not like any rogues she had ever seen. Chapter 3. The Name on a Dying Breath. The 3 rogues stared at her, their unnatural blue eyes flat and dead. They were monsters. Not wolves. They were something else, something broken and remade. The leader, a brute with a scarred-up muzzle, sniffed the air and let out a low growl that sounded more like cracking ice than a living creature. He seemed almost amused by this tiny, breathless interruption. Arya trembled, her knees threatening to buckle. Her healer's pouch felt heavy and useless on her hip. She had no weapons. She had no strength. She was, in every way, a mouse facing down 3 tigers. But then the old man groaned. The sound cut through Arya's fear. It was a sound of deep, profound pain. The leader rogue turned its attention back to him, raising a clawed hand to deliver the final blow. Stop! Arya shouted, and this time, her voice didn't shake. She did the only thing she could. She ran, not away, but at them. She fumbled at her pouch, her fingers finding the small cloth bag of dried stinging nettle and silver moss. It was a potent irritant, used for cleaning wounds that had festered. She grabbed a handful and flung it with all her might into the leader's face. The beast roared, a sound of surprise and sudden agony, clawing at its own eyes as the silver-laced herbs began to burn. The other 2, shocked by her audacity, lunged. One came from the left, one from the right. Arya was not a fighter. She was a survivor. She dropped, rolling on the damp earth, feeling the wind of their claws whistle over her head. The second rogue, faster than the first, twisted and snapped at her ankle. She felt a sharp, searing pain as its teeth grazed her skin, but her boot took the worst of it. She scrambled backward on her hands and heels, kicking desperately. She hit the burning carriage wheel. The heat was intense, blistering. The old man was right beside her, his breathing shallow. "Get behind me," she gasped, shoving him back against the wreckage, trying to shield him with her own small body. The leader rogue was back, its eyes streaming but still murderous. "The bloodline ends, old man," it snarled, its voice a gravelly-sounding horror. "The king will finally be broken. He will pay for the—" It stopped, shaking its head, trying to clear the herbs. "Bloodline? King?" Arya's mind raced. This was an assassination. The beast lunged again, this time at her. She had no tricks left. She shut her eyes, bracing for the impact, for the tear of claws and teeth. It never came. She opened her eyes. The old man's frail hand was outstretched. He had gripped the rogue's thick, furred wrist. It was an impossible image, the frail, dying elder holding back a monster 3 times his size. But it was happening. The rogue was frozen, its muscles locked. A faint, silver light seemed to pulse from the old man's palm, crawling up the rogue's arm like frost. The rogue screamed. It was a sound of pure terror. It ripped its arm back, a patch of its fur now smoking and charred, and stumbled away. Witchcraft. He's protected. From the forest, a new sound, the heavy, thundering paws of pack warriors. Real warriors. "We're done here," the leader snarled. In a flash of dark fur and cold light, the 3 rogues vanished into the trees. Silence descended, heavy and sudden, broken only by the crackle of the fire and Arya's own ragged breathing. Her leg throbbed. She ignored it. She crawled to the old man, who had slumped back against the wheel. He was bleeding. A dark, jagged piece of metal was embedded in his side. "It's okay," she whispered, her healer's instincts taking over. She pressed her hands against the wound, trying to stem the bleeding. "You're safe now. Help is coming." The old man looked at her. His eyes were not the cloudy eyes of a dying elder. They were sharp and ancient, and held a color she had never seen, like amethysts in a forge. He was not looking at her. He was looking into her. He grasped her wrist. A jolt, hot and cold, shot up her arm, making her gasp. It felt like recognition, like a key turning in a lock she never knew she had. He breathed. Her blood stopped. Her heart stopped. Everything stopped. How did he know her name? They had never met. "You saved me," he wheezed, his grip tightening. "But the curse, the Leakin he needs you." "What?" she whispered, confused and terrified. "What curse? Who needs me?" "My son." Before he could say more, the forest exploded with light. Massive, heavily armed wolves, no, warriors in half-shift, their upper bodies human and clad in black and silver armor, their legs and claws pure wolf, burst into the clearing. They were not her pack's warriors. These were royal guards. Their scents were stone, steel, and cold mountain air. Their leader, a giant of a man with a face carved from granite, took in the scene. The burning carriage, the dead guards, the bleeding old man, and the terrified Omega kneeling over him. He ignored Arya completely, dropping to one knee beside the man. "My Lord Tyrus, we are here. We are so sorry." One of the other guards, his eyes wide with horror, stared at Arya. His whisper was loud in the sudden, terrible silence. "Gods above, that's the Alpha King's father. She's killed him." Arya's world, already small and gray, shattered into a million pieces of ice. Chapter 4. The King of Ash and Ice. The guard's accusation, "She's killed him," hung in the smoky air. It was a word so heavy it crushed all other thoughts from Arya's mind.
Killed.
She was kneeling in the dirt, her hands sticky with the old man's blood. Her own blood, from the gash on her leg, was a dull throb. She was an Omega. She was a healer. She was now, apparently, a murderer. The royal guards formed a silver and black circle around her, their faces grim, their weapons drawn. Not one of them looked at the dying fire, or the dead guards, or the fleeing rogues. They all looked at her. She opened her mouth to speak, to scream, to plead. "I saved him. I tried." But no sound came. Then the world stopped. The wind died. The crackle of the flames seemed to muffle. The very air pressure in the clearing dropped, replaced by a presence so heavy it felt like a physical weight on her shoulders. The royal guards, who moments before had been tense and ready, suddenly stiffened. Then, as one, they dropped. They did not kneel. They went flat to the ground, faces pressed into the dirt, an act of utter, terrified submission. Arya remained, a small, trembling statue, still kneeling over the man named Tyrus. Footsteps. Heavy. Unhurried. Each step was a hammer blow against the sudden silence. They came from the darkest part of the forest, and as he emerged, the shadows seemed to cling to him, as if reluctant to let him go. He was a king. Arya had never seen Alpha King Khal Draven, but she knew him. Every wolf did. He was a story told to frighten children, a nightmare whispered among Omegas. He was tall, clad in armor not of gleaming silver, but of a dark, matte black that seemed to drink the light. Silver chains crisscrossed his chest, and a great black fur cloak settled on his shoulders. He was beautiful, in the way a winter storm is beautiful, all power, all ice, and utterly merciless. He did not look at his father. His eyes, the color of a frozen sky, landed on Arya. They were not angry. They were not sad. They were empty. It was an emptiness that terrified her more than any rage. "You," he said. His voice was not loud, but it cut through the clearing a low, velvet rumble that vibrated in her bones. He moved. He did not walk. He glided, a predator assessing his territory. He stopped at the wreckage, finally allowing his gaze to fall on his father. For a moment, his jaw tensed. A flicker of something. Then it was gone. He looked back at Arya. "An Omega," he stated. His voice was laced with a chilling smoothness, like polished ice. "In the right place, at the right time. How convenient." He crouched, bringing himself level with her. Arya's breath hitched. She could smell him now. Frost. Pine. And a sharp, metallic scent like a blade just pulled from a forge. He was close. Too close. "You led them here," he accused, his voice dropping to a whisper that was only for her. "You were the bait. Or perhaps," he reached out, and with one armored finger, he tilted her chin up, forcing her to meet his gaze. "You were the blade." "No," she finally choked out, the word a broken gasp. I saved." Silence. The command was absolute. It wrapped around her throat, stealing her breath. Her Omega instinct screamed at her to submit, to roll over, to die if he wished it. He stared at her, his icy eyes tracing her features, her dirt-streaked face, her trembling lips, the tear tracks on her cheeks. And then, something happened. His perfect, cold expression broke. His body went rigid. His eyes, once clear ice, suddenly flared with a terrifying, molten gold light. A sound ripped from his chest, a low, guttural vibration that was not human. It was not a word. It was a rumble. The sound of a beast waking. Arya recoiled, but his grip on her chin was iron. He was staring at her, but he was not seeing her. He was seeing something else. Something on her. Something in her. The accusation in his eyes was gone, replaced by a raw, violent shock. A possessive, untamed horror. He looked at her as if she was both his salvation and his executioner. The growl in his chest deepened, shaping itself into a snarl aimed not at her, at his own guards. "Seize her," he commanded, his voice suddenly rough, strained. He stood up, tearing his gaze from her as if it physically pained him. He ran a hand over his face, his composure shattering. "Take her to the cells," he ordered, his back to her now. "If my father—" He stopped. He took a deep, shuddering breath. He turned, and the King of Ice was back, but his eyes were still burning. "If he dies, you will pray for a death the rogues would have given you." The guards hauled Arya to her feet. As they dragged her away, she looked back. Alpha King Khal was not with his father. He was watching her, his fists clenched, his entire body shaking with a silent, terrible war. Chapter 5. The Scent That Chains the King. The cell was cold. It was not the simple holding cell of her pack. This was a dungeon, carved from the stone beneath the royal stronghold. The air was dead and damp, carrying the smell of mold and old, cold sorrow. A single, slivered window, high up and out of reach, showed only a sliver of black sky. There was no bed. Just stone. Cold, unforgiving stone. Arya slid down the wall until she sat on the filthy floor, pulling her knees to her chest. She was shaking. Not from the cold. From the king. She replayed it again and again. The accusation. The growl. The look in his eyes. He had accused her of murder, but the way he looked at her in that last second, it was not the look of an executioner. It was something else. Something possessive. Something hungry. It made no sense. Why would he look at her like that? She was an Omega. She was invisible. A sharp, throbbing pain brought her back. Her leg. The rogue's teeth had broken the skin. She pulled up her torn trousers. The bite was shallow, but it was already red and inflamed. It wasn't healing. Just like the warrior Jorin's wound. This was wrong. This was that same strange cold, that same sickness. She pressed her hand to it, trying to will some warmth, some healing into it. My mother, she thought, a fresh wave of despair washing over her. Is this how it happened? Was she accused? Was she locked away in the cold? She heard footsteps. Heavy, booted steps. Not the king's graceful, predatory tread. This was a guard. He stopped outside her cell. Arya looked up, her heart pounding. Please, she whispered. The old man, Lord Tyrus, is he alive? The guard, a stern man with a thick beard, peered at her through the bars. His face was pale. The king's father is in the care of the royal healers. You are to be silent. He shoved a wooden bowl of water and a piece of stale bread through a slot at the bottom of the door. Arya ignored it. But I helped him, she pleaded. He knew my name. The guard's head snapped up. His eyes narrowed. What did you say? He said my name.
Arya.
He said I had to help his son. The guard's face went from pale to ashen. He took a step back, making a strange sign over his chest. You're her daughter, he whispered, his voice thick with a sudden, superstitious fear. The Omega witch from the Red Moon Ravine. The one whose mother. He clamped his mouth shut. What? Arya scrambled to the bars, gripping them. What about my mother? What witch? The guard just stared at her, his eyes wide. The king, he hasn't left the corridor above this dungeon. Not since you were brought here. What are you talking about? He hasn't gone to his father's side, the guard said, his voice a low, confused murmur. He hasn't spoken to the council. He's just pacing, back and forth, right up there. He pointed to the stone ceiling, like a caged animal. He won't rest. He won't eat. He just listens. The guard looked at her, truly looked at her, and his fear was replaced by a deep confusion. What did you do to him, girl? I did nothing, Arya cried, shaking the bars. Before the guard could answer, a new sound echoed in the stone corridor. A bell. Not the loud, clanging alarm of the pack. This was a high-pitched, silver bell, ringing with a frantic, desperate urgency. A second guard, wearing the silver crest of the healer's wing, skidded around the corner, his armor rattling. He's barricaded, the new guard yelled. The king. He's barricaded himself in the corridor above the dungeon. He won't let us pass. What? Arya's guard said. But the alarm. It's the North Tower, the new guard shouted, gasping for breath. They're back. The same blue-eyed rogues. They got past the sentries. They're in the healer's wing. They're trying to finish the job. The first guard's blood drained from his face. Gods. He's trapped himself to watch her, and they're murdering his father. Chapter 6. The Cage of Stone and Silver. Arya's world tilted. He's trapped himself. The king. He was pacing above her cell, so consumed by her that he had locked himself away, and now his father was undefended. The alarm bell was a frantic, screaming pulse in the stone. She could hear the shouts now, distant but echoing down the corridor. The North Tower. Secure the king. The two guards outside her cell looked at each other in raw panic. I have to get to the wing, the healer guard shouted. The king's orders were clear. This thing stays locked up, her guard retorted. They ran. Both of them. Thundering boots faded down the hallway, leaving Arya alone in the chaos. He needs you. Tyrus's voice, frail but clear, echoed in her mind. He needs you. He hadn't meant the king. He had meant himself. Arya looked at the cell door. The lock was thick, ancient iron. But the stone, it was old. She ran her fingers over the wall near the hinge. It was crumbling. The mortar turned to dust. This dungeon was not built for strength. It was built to forget. She thought of her mother, dead in a ravine. She thought of Tyrus, bleeding by a fire. She thought of the king's mad, golden eyes. No more. She braced her feet against the far wall and pushed at the loose block near the hinge. It didn't budge. She was just an Omega. Weak. Powerless. You're as weak as your bloodline. Lyra's sneer.
Arya growled.
A low, desperate sound she didn't recognize. She slammed her shoulder into the stone. Pain, sharp and bright, shot up her arm. But the stone shifted. She did it again. And again. Her healer's fingers, small but strong, dug into the cracks. She pulled. Stone grated against stone. A sharp crack. The hinge stone fell to the floor, and the heavy door sagged open just wide enough for her to slip through. She was out. She was free. And she was going to be executed for it. She ran. The corridor was empty. She followed the sounds of shouting. She didn't know the layout of the royal stronghold, yet her feet seemed to know where to turn. A left, a right up a narrow set of stairs. A memory, faint as perfume, pricked at her mind. A woman with hair like her own, humming, walking this very path. A headache bloomed behind her eyes. She pushed it down. She burst through a set of double doors into the healer's wing. It was a war zone. Healers in white robes lay still on the marble floor. 2 royal guards were slumped against a wall, their silver armor torn open. And in the center of the vast room, Lord Tyrus was on his bed. The 3 blue-eyed rogues were there. They had finished the guards and were advancing on the bed. The old bloodline ends, the leader snarled, the same one from the forest. The curse will finish the son, and we will finish the father. No. Arya's scream made them pause. They turned, their cold blue eyes widening in disbelief. You, the leader snarled. The little mouse. But someone else had heard her. From a connecting archway, a sound of pure, unadulterated rage. A roar that was not a man's, not a wolf's, but something terrible born of both. Alpha King Kale exploded into the room. But this was not the king from the forest. This was a monster. Black, oily fur was crawling up his arms, over his shoulders, hissing as it covered his skin. His armor was cracking and falling away. His hands were claws. His face was twisted, halfway between man and beast, and his eyes were not ice or gold. They were solid, burning coals of primal fury. The Leakin, the rogue leader, hissed a new, real fear in his voice. The curse, it's taking him. He can't control it. He's lost. Kill the father. Now. Kale was on his knees, clutching his head, screaming. He was fighting himself. The black fur advanced, covering his chest. He was losing. This was the curse Tyrus spoke of. One of the rogues, seeing its chance, ignored the king and lunged at Tyrus, a long, silver blade raised. Arya didn't think. She moved. She threw herself forward, climbing onto the high bed, and draped her own small body over Tyrus. A shield of flesh and bone. She squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for the blade. It never came. A blur of black and gold. Kale moved. He intercepted the rogue, his claws tearing through its throat in a spray of dark blood. But the beast was in control. He was roaring, a mindless, rabid sound. He turned, his burning eyes seeing nothing but threats. The other 2 rogues fled. But Arya was still there, on the bed. A threat. Kale reared back, his claws raised, and swung at her. She was trapped. She couldn't move without exposing Tyrus. She just looked at him. Kale, she whispered. His name. The Leakin, the monster, the curse, it was about to strike her down. She lifted her hand. Not to fight. To shield. Her palm, small and stained with dirt, pressed flat against his chest. Right over his raging heart. Everything stopped. The roar died in his throat, choking into a gasp. The burning coals of his eyes flickered, and for a second, the man's blue ice peeked through. The black fur, it retreated. It pulled back from his skin like a dying shadow. Kale stared at his clawed hand, which was frozen inches from her face. He stared at her hand, pressed against his skin. He was breathing like he had just run 1,000 miles, his chest heaving. The man, Kale, surfaced from the monster. He looked at her, not with coldness, not with disgust, but with raw, terrified shock. He grabbed her wrist. Not the one on his chest. The other one. He yanked her off the bed, pulling her so close their faces were inches apart. His voice was ragged, a desperate, broken whisper. What are you? Chapter 7. The Gilded Cage. The monster was gone. In its place, the King of Ice stood once more, breathing hard, his hand still locked on Arya's wrist. The healer's wing was a wreck of overturned tables, spilled potions, and the heavy, copper smell of blood. Kale's blue eyes were sharp, scanning her, searching for something. His grip was so tight it hurt. You, he said, his voice a raw rasp. You stop it. It was not a question. It was a statement. A fact he had just discovered and already hated. He hated it because it made him weak, and a king could not be weak. A guard burst in, his armor rattling. My king. We. He stopped, staring at the king holding the Omega. Kale did not let her go. He spoke to the guard, but his eyes never left Arya's. Find my father's personal physician. Get him here. Now. He finally released her, shoving her back a step. As for her, Arya tensed, expecting the dungeon, expecting death. She is not to be harmed, Kale commanded, his voice cold and final. She is not to leave this wing. She is the caretaker. My father's new caretaker. The guard looked stunned. My king? An Omega. Did I ask for your opinion, Captain? Kale snapped. No, my king. She will stay with him. She will tend to him. And if he wakes, Kale said, his voice dropping, she will be the first person he sees. She will not leave his side. Am I clear? Yes, Alpha King. Arya's world shifted again. She was not a prisoner. She was a tool. A necessary, hated tool. Kale turned and stalked from the room, the black fur and claws gone, but the aura of the beast still clung to him like a shroud. Thus, her new life began. It was a strange kind of prison. She was moved from the dungeon, but not to freedom. She was given a small, windowless cot in an alcove inside Lord Tyrus's grand chamber. She ate scraps brought by servants who would not look at her. She was cleaner than she had been in the dungeon, but she had never felt more filthy. The royals and high-ranking nobles who came to visit the still unconscious Tyrus looked at her with open disgust. That's it, a noblewoman whispered one afternoon, her voice like cracking ice. That's the Omega Witch? She's so small. And plain. I heard she crawled from the dungeon, another muttered. I heard she used black magic on the king in the forest. Arya kept her head down, changing the cool cloths on Tyrus's forehead. His fever was high. The wound in his side, though stitched by the royal physician, was dark and refused to heal. It felt just like her leg. It felt cold. She was alone, in a room full of enemies. She was invisible, yet she was the center of all their hatred. She focused on Tyrus. She talked to him, her voice a low whisper. You knew my name, she murmured, her hands gentle as she cleaned the wound. Why did you know my name? What is this curse you spoke of? Tyrus, of course, did not answer. But she felt it again. That strange connection. When she touched him, she felt that same jolt she had felt in the forest. A feeling of recognition. She did not see the king for 3 days. But she felt him. Sometimes, late at night, she would feel a gaze on her. A heavy, intense pressure. She would look up, but there was no one there. One night, she woke from a half-sleep, her heart pounding. The room was dark, save for the single candle by Tyrus's bed. She stood, walking to the grand balcony that overlooked the courtyard. The night air was cold. She looked down. There, in the moonlight, he stood, Alpha King Kale. He was in the center of the training yard, unmoving, staring straight up at her balcony. He was not wearing his armor. He was in simple black trousers and a loose tunic. He just watched. His jaw was clenched, his fists opening and closing at his sides. He was fighting. Fighting the bond, fighting the need, fighting the weakness that she represented. Arya shivered, and it was not from the cold. She was the Omega who was supposed to be invisible, but she was the only thing the king could see. Chapter 8. The Beast and the Man. A week passed. It was a strange kind of prison, made of silk sheets she was not allowed to sleep in and golden plates she was not allowed to eat from. Her entire world was Lord Tyrus's sick room. She bathed his face. She forced water past his lips. She studied the strange, cold wound that refused to heal. The royal physician, a stern wolf named Alara, watched her with suspicious eyes but did not stop her, because Tyrus still lived. Arya was in this new, awful rhythm. She was surviving. Then she heard the sound. It was not the polite, muffled noise of the royal stronghold. It was a sound from her old life. A crash of metal. A roar of pure, unfiltered rage. And shouting. It was coming from the training yard, just below the balcony. Arya's hands stilled on the bowl of water. Her heart, which had been in a state of low, constant fear, gave a single, hard thump. She heard a guard in the hallway shout. He's lost it. The Leakin is out. Get the chains.
Kale. She did not think.
She did not plan. She only moved. She dropped the cloth, ran from Tyrus's chamber, and ignored the startled cry of the guard at the door. Omega!
Get back.
The king is not. She pushed past him. She ran down the marble hallway, her bare feet slapping on the cold stone. She followed the noise. The sound of a man breaking. She burst into the sunlight of the training yard. It was chaos. Kale was in the center of the yard, but it was not Kale. It was the beast. The black, oily fur was crawling over his skin, hissing and writhing like a nest of snakes. He had a training sword in one hand, but his other hand was a set of black claws. He had just thrown his high commander, a massive wolf named Riker, into a weapons rack. Warriors were circling him, not with spears, but with heavy silver-laced chains. My king. Fight it. Riker yelled, clutching a bleeding arm. It's no good, another shouted. He can't hear you. It's getting stronger. Kale roared, a sound of agony and rage, and swung at them. He was not a man. He was a storm. He was a weapon. He was a prisoner in his own skin.
Adia.
She heard her name. It was Tyrus's physician, Alara, screaming at her from the doorway. Get back inside. You will be killed. The warriors were trying to get close, to throw the chains. But the beast was too fast. It was all rage, all instinct. And its eyes, those burning coals, landed on the new movement. They landed on her. The beast snarled, a low, warning rumble. It saw a threat. A small, insignificant threat. Arya stopped. The entire yard went silent. Even Kale, the beast, paused. The warriors froze, chains in hand. Arya took one step. Then another. She walked onto the dusty ground. Omega. Riker gasped, bleeding. What are you doing? Run. She ignored him. She ignored the guards. She ignored the part of her brain that was screaming in pure, primal terror. She walked toward the monster that was wearing the king's face. The Leakin snarled, lowering its stance. It raised its clawed hand, ready to strike her down. Arya stopped, just out of his reach. She looked at him. Not at the monster. Not at the fur. She looked at his eyes. Beneath the burning coals, she saw the blue ice. She saw the man drowning. She did not plead. She did not cower. Kale, she said. Her voice was soft, but it cut through the tension like a blade. The beast flinched, as if she had struck him. It hissed, the black fur pulling back from his face for a second. Kale, she said again, a little firmer. Look at me. He was shaking. The man and the monster were at war, and it was tearing him apart. He roared, but the sound was weaker, laced with pain. Arya took the final step. She was inside his guard. She was close enough to touch. She lifted her hand. The same hand that had touched his chest in the healer's wing. The warriors gasped, expecting to see her torn apart. She did not touch his chest. She gently, slowly, placed her hand on his arm, right where the black fur was thickest. It was like throwing water on a fire. The hissing stopped. The black fur did not just stop. It fled. It receded from his skin in a visible, panicked wave, pulling back from her touch as if it had been burned. Kale gasped, a great, shuddering intake of breath. The claws retracted. The sword clattered to the ground. The beast was gone. The king remained, his entire body trembling, his skin pale and slick with sweat. He was breathing hard, his chest heaving. Arya's hand was still on his arm. The entire yard was silent. Every guard, every warrior, Riker, Alara, all of them stared, their mouths open. Kale slowly, so slowly, lifted his head. His eyes were no longer burning coals. They were the king's blue eyes, but they were not cold. Not now. They were raw, vulnerable, confused, and full of a terrifying, desperate need. His gaze locked with hers. It was too long. It was too deep. It was a look that should not happen between a king and an Omega. In that moment, she was not powerless. She was necessary. And in this kingdom, that was the most dangerous thing she could possibly be. Chapter 9. The King's Protection. The silence from the training yard did not last long. It was replaced by whispers. The whispers followed Arya everywhere. She was no longer just the Omega Witch. She was something more terrifying. She was the Omega who could control the King's Beast. The court's hatred turned from simple disgust to a sharp, panicked fear. Because a weak, bewitched king was a threat to them all. Arya felt the change instantly. Servants who used to ignore her now flinched when she entered a room. The royal physician, Alara, no longer looked at her with suspicion, but with a strange, calculating respect. Even the guards at Tyrus's door bowed their heads. They did not bow to her, but to the power she held over their master. This new power was a heavier chain than any dungeon. She tried to stay in Tyrus's room, but her duties as caretaker required her to fetch clean linens and herbs from the main stores. It was on one of these trips, in a long, tapestry-lined corridor, that the whispers found a voice. Filth. The voice was high, cold, and dripping with contempt. Arya stopped. Lady Seraphina stood in her path, flanked by two other noble women. Seraphina was tall, beautiful, and wore a gown of dark red silk that made her look like a splash of blood against the stone. I am speaking to you, Omega, Seraphina said, stepping closer. The air around her smelled of expensive, cloying perfume. Arya kept her eyes down. My lady. You think you are something, do you not? Seraphina sneered, circling her. A little Omega who holds the king's leash. You have bewitched him. You have brought this sickness upon him. I have done nothing, Arya said, her voice quiet. She just wanted to get back to Tyrus's room. You exist, Seraphina spat. His beast was a secret, a curse he managed, a burden he carried for his people. Then you arrived, and now he is weak. He is shamed. He is made a fool in his own training yard because of you. Seraphina was in front of her now, her face twisted in a mask of righteous hate. I am cleansing this court, Seraphina whispered, her hand moving to her waist. She shoved Arya hard. Arya stumbled back, dropping her basket of clean linens. She hit the stone wall. My lady, please, Arya begged, her heart hammering. Pleading? Good, Seraphina said. She drew a small, gleaming knife from her belt, its handle set with green jewels. A witch who bleeds is just a woman, after all. And an Omega who bleeds is just a mess. She raised the knife. I would not do that. The voice was not a roar. It was a blade of pure, freezing ice. Lady Seraphina froze. Alpha King Kale stood at the end of the corridor. He was not in training gear. He was in his full court regalia, black armor polished, his fur-lined cloak sweeping the floor. He looked every inch the merciless king. Seraphina's face went pale. My king. I was just this thing. I saw what you were just, Kale said, his voice dangerously soft. He walked forward, his boots silent on the stone. He did not look at Seraphina. He did not look at her friends, who were already trying to melt into the tapestries. He stopped in front of Arya. She was still pressed against the wall, trembling. The entire court was watching. This was a test. Kale looked at the spilled linens. He looked at the fear in Arya's eyes. Then he did something that shattered the world. He bent. He reached down and, in full view of the court, he offered his hand, his armored, royal, alpha hand, to the Omega. Arya stared at it. Taking it would be a death sentence. Arya, he said. Just her name. Quiet. A command. Her hand, small and shaking, slipped into his. He did not yank her up. He gently, but firmly, pulled her to her feet. He tucked her behind him, placing his body between her and the noblewoman. Only then did he turn his ice-cold gaze on Lady Seraphina. She is under my protection, he stated. The words were simple. They were a vow and a death sentence. Touch her again, Lady Seraphina, and you will find out if your noble blood protects you from the charge of treason. Seraphina's jeweled knife clattered to the floor. My king, she stammered. Go, he commanded. Seraphina and her friends fled. The corridor was silent, save for Arya's ragged breathing. Kale was a wall of black armor in front of her. He was radiating rage. But she realized, with a jolt, it was not for Seraphina. It was for the situation. It was for the weakness of having to do this. He turned. His face was a cold, hard mask. His desire was now a public danger. You, he growled, his voice low and furious. You will not leave my sight. You will not walk these halls alone. You are a problem I did not ask for. He grabbed her arm, his grip just shy of painful. My chambers. Now. He started pulling her down the hall, and Arya had no choice but to follow. She did not know if he was protecting her, or if he was finally, truly, taking her to be caged. Chapter 10. The Blades Width Apart. Kale's chambers were not a room. They were a territory. A vast, cold expanse of black stone, dark fur rugs, and a wind that seemed to blow even when the balcony doors were sealed. It smelled of him, frost, pine, and that sharp, metallic scent of power. He did not release her arm until they were in the very center, standing before a fireplace large enough to roast an ox. The flames cast wild, dancing shadows that made the room feel alive, and not in a good way. He finally let go, shoving her away from him. You will stay here, he growled. Here? Arya's voice was a small, trembling thing. In your chambers? My king, I cannot. Lord Tyrus. My father is attended by the best physician in the kingdom, Kale snapped, turning his back on her. He stalked to a massive oak table covered in maps and daggers. He does not need you. He needs a healer. I, on the other hand, need a solution. A solution? To me. He spun around, his blue eyes blazing. You are a weapon, Omega. A weakness. A target. Lady Seraphina was not the first, and she will not be the last. You walk through my court, and you invite blades. You stand in a room, and you make me weak. Arya flinched, the words striking her harder than any physical blow. I did not ask for this. Neither did I, he roared. The sound rattled a nearby suit of armor. He was breathing hard, the beast just under his skin, visible in the tension of his jaw and the clenching of his fists. He was fighting it. He was fighting because she was here. He took a long, ragged breath, pacing to the cold window. This connection. This thing. He spat the word. That calms the curse. It makes you valuable. And anything valuable in this kingdom gets stolen. Or it gets broken. He turned back, his face a mask of cold strategy. You cannot be weak. You cannot be a target. If you are to be my problem, then you will learn to survive. Learn to survive.
Arya repeated, confused.
You will train, he declared. You are an Omega. You are small. You are prey. We will change that. Or, we will at least make you faster. And so began a new, stranger, and more terrifying prison. Every day, at dawn, Kale took her to a private, high-walled courtyard. He did not send his commander. He did not send his guards. He came himself. This is not discipline, he had said on the first day, his voice flat as he tossed a wooden practice blade at her feet. Discipline is for those who belong. This is preservation. You are a royal asset. I am protecting my investment. But it felt like discipline. It felt like punishment. He was a merciless teacher. He did not care that she was a healer. He did not care that she had never held a weapon. Again, he'd command, his own blade a blur. Arya scrambled up from the dust, her arms aching, her lungs burning. She was covered in bruises. He never hit her, not really. But he also never missed. He parried her every clumsy attempt, his wooden sword connecting with her shoulder, her ribs, her arm, with a sharp thwack that left her breathless. You are thinking, he growled, circling her. Stop thinking. You cannot think a blade. You must feel it. Where is he going? Where is the opening? I don't see an opening, she cried, swinging in a wide, desperate arc. He didn't even move his feet. He simply ducked under her swing, spun, and hooked her ankle with his own. Arya yelped as her legs were swept from under her, and she landed hard on her back. The breath knocked from her lungs. He was on her in a second. Not on top of her, but over her. He straddled her, planting one knee by her hip, his other foot by her shoulder. He pressed the tip of his wooden sword against the hollow of her throat. She was pinned. She was trapped. She was utterly at his mercy. The air vanished from the courtyard. All she could hear was her own heart. All she could see were his eyes. They were not cold.
Not now.
They were a dark, stormy blue, full of something. Tension. A fire that had nothing to do with training. They were so close. She could feel the heat radiating from his body, could smell the sweat and the pine. He was not breathing hard. He was just watching. His gaze dropped from her eyes to her mouth, which was parted as she gasped for air. The wooden sword at her throat did not move. But she felt his grip on the hilt tighten. Your goal, he whispered, his voice suddenly thick, is to resist. To fight. To survive. I can't, she breathed. You must. His voice was almost a plea. This was not training. This was something else. This was a war, fought in the blade's width of air between their bodies. The bond was a living thing in the small space, a current pulling them together. He was close enough to kiss. He was close enough to kill.
He leaned in.
Arya's heart stopped. She saw his eyes close. A sharp, silver bell from the tower broke the spell. Kale recoiled as if he'd been burned. He jumped back, standing and turning away from her, his entire body rigid. He ran a hand through his dark hair, breathing hard. That is enough, he growled, his back to her. You are dismissed. Arya scrambled to her feet, her body shaking, her skin on fire where he had been near. She fled. She ran from the courtyard, but she could not run from the truth. This was not making her stronger. It was making the bond worse. It was making it unbearable. She ran back to the healer's wing, needing the safety of Tyrus's silent room. As she rounded the corner, she skidded to a halt. The king's physician, Alara, was in the hallway, in a heated, hushed argument with Kale's commander, Riker. Cannot keep this from him, Alara was saying, her voice a frantic whisper. The king's orders are absolute. Riker hissed back. No one speaks of it. Especially not to the caretaker. He is dying. Alara's voice cracked. Riker, the curse, it's accelerating. Every time he loses control, and every time she pulls him back, it takes a piece of him. This Omega is not his salvation. She is his end. She is killing him, and she does not even know it. Chapter 11. The Ravine of Memory. Aria's blood turned to ice. She is killing him. The words echoed Alara's, but they were in her own mind. She stumbled back, flattening herself against a cold stone tapestry, her entire body numb. The physician's words were a poison, seeping into her skin. Every time she pulls him back, it takes a piece of him. She thought of the training yard, the moment her hand had touched his arm. The relief on his face, quickly hidden. She had thought she was helping him. She had thought she was saving him from the monster. But she was just a different kind of monster. A quieter one. She was the sickness and he was the symptom. She fled. She did not go to Tyrus's room. She did not go back to Kale's chambers. She ran to the one place that had ever felt like her own, the small, dusty archive room behind the kitchens, where the old pack ledgers were kept. It was a place no one ever went. She huddled behind a shelf of crumbling scrolls, pulling her knees to her chest. She was a killer. She was her mother's daughter.
Wait.
Her mother. The Omega Witch from the Red Moon Ravine. The one whose mother. The guard's words. Her mother was the same, always trying to heal things that weren't her business. Lyra's words. A new, cold dread, sharper than anything she had felt before, settled in her stomach. What about her mother? The pack had said it was an accident.
A fall.
But the pieces did not fit. The fear in the guard's eyes. The way Tyrus had known her name. The strange, cold sickness in the wounds. You need to know, she whispered to herself. Her voice sounded strange in the dusty silence. She was in the royal archive. Not the small pack ledger room, but the grand one. She had been given a pass by Alara to fetch herbalism records. She was surrounded by the history of the kingdom. Arya, he needs you. Tyrus had known. She stood. Her hands were shaking, but not from fear. From purpose. She was not a warrior. She was not a noble. But she was a healer, and she was a daughter. She would find the truth. She started pulling scrolls. Not herbals. Not maps. She went to the back, to the dark, dust-covered shelves that held the records of the Alphas. The personal records. She looked for the year of her mother's death. 15 years ago. She found it. A thick, leather-bound book. Annals of the Court. Year of the Crimson Moon. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. The pages were dry, crackling. She scanned the dates. Reports on harvests. Trade disputes. And then she saw it. A single, short entry. Queen Alessa. Deceased. Aria's breath hitched. Kale's mother. She had died the same week as Aria's. She read on, her heart pounding a frantic, terrible rhythm. Cause of death. Ravine sickness. A wasting illness of the blood, incurable. Attended by royal physician and court adjuncts. Ravine sickness. The name was a lie. She knew it. The cold, unhealing wounds. The name they gave the sickness from the blue-eyed rogues. But there was a second entry, scribbled in the margin by a different, shakier hand. Physician's private note. Her Majesty was poisoned. The attending adjunct, a Red Moon Omega, was found responsible. The Omega fled before capture, fell to her death in a ravine. Justice served by the goddess. The Alpha King is inconsolable. Arya dropped the book. It clattered to the stone floor, the sound echoing like a scream. The attending adjunct, a Red Moon Omega, fled before capture. Fell to her death in a ravine. No, she whispered. It was not a fall. It was not an accident. Her mother had been accused of murdering the queen. She had been hunted. She had been killed. And you, a cold voice in her head whispered, are her daughter. You are healing the son of the woman your mother murdered. The bond. That feeling of recognition. The way Tyrus knew her name. The way Kale's beast calmed at her touch. It was not a blessing. It was a curse. A cosmic, terrible joke. Her mother, the healer. Her, the healer. Both of them, accused of destroying the very men they were trying to save. Guilt and despair washed over her, so profound it was a physical weight.
She was a sin.
Her very existence was an insult to the king she was starting to. She could not even form the word. She sank to the floor, the open book at her feet. Her life had been a lie. Her mother's death was a lie. And the one true, powerful thing she had ever felt, this pull to Kale, was forbidden. It was built on a foundation of blood and murder. A shadow fell over her. She looked up, her eyes blurred with tears. Alpha King Kale stood in the doorway of the archive. He was not in his training gear. He was in his full, black armor. He must have been looking for her. His face was a mask of cold fury. His gaze was not on her. It was on the open book on the floor, on the page that declared her mother a killer. He looked from the page to her face. His own face, once full of that hot, confused tension, went blank. It was not the coldness of ice. It was the absolute, terrifying emptiness of a dead star. His eyes, which had burned for her, were now just cold. "So," he whispered, his voice a low, gravelly rasp that held no life. "You are your mother's sin." Chapter 12. The Fury of a Caring King. The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp as a guillotine. "You are your mother's sin." Arya's despair shattered, and in its place, a strange, burning defiance sparked to life. He was wrong. Her mother was not a killer. She knew it. She knew it with the same certainty that she knew her own name. "She was not," Arya said, her voice shaking but hard. She got to her feet, wiping the tears from her face with a dirty hand. "She was a healer. They lied." Kale laughed. It was a terrible sound, empty of all humor. "They lied. A convenient truth for the daughter of a murderer." "How do you know?" Arya challenged, taking a step toward him. She was small, covered in dust, and facing a king in armor, but she did not care. "You were just a boy. You read a line in a book. I knew her." "You knew a lie," he snarled, stepping into the archive. He kicked the book aside. "My mother is dead. Your mother killed her. And you have been healing me." The irony, the sheer filth of it, was written on his face. He looked at her as if she was the poison that had killed his mother, brought back to life. "I am leaving," Arya declared. Her voice was final. She was broken, but she was not a toy. She was not a tool. And she would not be the sin of a woman she never knew. "You are going nowhere," he commanded. "You cannot stop me," she said, and she pushed past him. It was a stupid, foolish move. He was an Alpha King. She was an Omega. He could snap her neck before she took a breath. But he let her pass. He let her walk out of the archive, his silence a heavy, burning weight on her back. He let her run down the corridors. He let her flee. He let her go because he believed the lie. He let her go because he wanted her to be guilty. It was easier than feeling whatever it was he had been feeling. She ran. She did not know where she was going. She just knew she had to get out. Out of the stronghold. Out of the court. Away from him. She found a side door, one used by the kitchen staff. She slipped out into the twilight. The air was cold, crisp. She was in an alleyway between the stronghold and the outer wall. She was free. For about 30 seconds.
A sound.
A scrape of a boot on cobblestone.
Arya froze.
Well, a voice growled from the shadows. The little mouse. The king's pet. 3 figures stepped out, blocking the alley. They were not royals. They were not guards. They were rogues. Not the blue-eyed, magical ones. These were the regular, brutal kind. But they were wearing the colors of a border patrol. Pack warriors. Her pack. It was Jorin, the warrior she had healed in the very beginning. And with him, 2 others she recognized from the infirmary. Jorin.
Arya whispered, confused.
"What are you doing here?" "Orders, witch," Jorin spat. He was not the grateful warrior from the infirmary. His eyes were hard. "Lyra sent her regards. She said you were a loose end." "Lyra? This is the royal stronghold. You cannot be here." "Oh, but we can," Jorin said, a cruel smile twisting his face. "Turns out, when the king is distracted by a pretty new pet, the old pack's patrols can slip right in. We're here to collect you. Bring you home." Home. The word was a threat. "No," Arya said, backing away. "We ain't got a choice, Arya," Jorin said, his voice dropping. "She said if we don't bring you, she'll tell the king's court about the sickness, about how our pack is falling apart. She's using us to get to you, and she's using you to start a war." They lunged.
Arya screamed.
She turned to run, but there was nowhere to go. Jorin grabbed her arm, his fingers like a steel trap. "Let her go." The voice was not Kale's. It was not a command. It was a death sentence. Kale dropped from the wall above, landing between Arya and the warriors. He was not wearing his armor. He was in the simple black tunic and trousers from the training yard. He was fast. He was silent. He had followed her. He had been watching. Jorin and his men stumbled back, their faces ashen. "Alpha King." "She is under my protection," Kale said. His voice was low, shaking with a fury so profound it seemed to make the air vibrate. This was not the Cold King. This was not the tormented beast. This was something new. This was a man, furious that someone was touching what was his. We meant no harm, Your Majesty, Jorin stammered, shoving Arya away from him. You put your hands on her, Kale whispered. He took a step. And then the curse struck. But it was not the Leakin.
Kale gasped.
His hand flew to his chest. He staggered, leaning against the alley wall. His face, which had been pale with rage, was now a deathly, waxy white. Black veins, like poisoned roots, crawled up his neck. My king. Arya screamed, her own fear forgotten. The curse. Jorin whispered, his eyes wide with terror. It's getting worse. Kale choked out, his body failing. He was dying. Right here. Right in front of her. His body was failing because she was near. No, she realized. It was failing because he had let her go. Because he had pushed the bond away. He's weak, one of the other warriors shouted, seeing his chance. He drew a blade.
Kill him.
Kill the king. Lyra will make us alphas for this. He lunged at the fallen, gasping king. Chapter 13. The Choice in the Alley. The warrior's blade was a streak of dirty silver in the twilight. He lunged, not at Arya, but at the king. At Kale, who was slumped against the alley wall, his body a map of black, poisoned veins, his breath a ragged, failing gasp. Arya's mind screamed. He hates me. He called me a sin. He cast me out. And the warrior's blade was coming down. He followed me. He was protecting me. Arya did not think. She acted. She was a healer. She was not a fighter. She could not stop the blade. But she could be a shield. She threw herself forward. The rogue warrior, Jorin, caught her arm, his grip like a steel trap. Get out of the way, little witch. This is not your fight. No, she screamed. She twisted, biting his hand. Jorin roared in pain and backhanded her across the face. The stone wall slammed into her back, and she fell to the grimy cobblestones. Pain exploded behind her eyes. The other warrior, the one with the sword, laughed. She's not so tough without the king, is she? He raised the blade high for the final, killing blow on the gasping alpha. Arya scrambled on her hands and knees. Her entire life, she had been told she was weak, invisible, and worthless. She had been a mouse in a world of wolves. But in that moment, seeing the man who was her torment and her everything, about to die, she found a new kind of strength. She did not run. She did not hide. She launched herself from the ground, ignoring the warrior, and threw her body over Kale's. She landed hard on his chest, a small, human shield. You cannot have him, she shrieked, her face pressed against his tunic. Then I will take you both, the warrior snarled, the sword starting its downward path. Arya squeezed her eyes shut. She did not wait for the blade. She pressed both her hands flat against Kale's chest, right over the black, dying veins. She could feel the cold under his skin. It was a dead, empty cold. And beneath it, a tiny, frantic fire, the Leakin, his soul, trapped and drowning. He called me a sin. He hates me. But I will not let you die. She pushed. Not with her muscles. She pushed with her life. She poured all the warmth she had, all the fear, all the desperate, forbidden love, all of herself into him. It was a torrent. It felt like she was ripping her own soul out and handing it to him. Arya screamed. But Kale gasped. It was not a gasp of pain. It was a breath. A deep, shuddering, living breath. The black veins under her hands hissed like water on a forge. They did not just fade. They fled. They retreated from her touch, pulling back from his neck, his face, his chest, in a violent, visible retreat. The warrior's sword was inches from her back when a hand shot up and caught the man's wrist. It was Kale's hand. His grip was iron. His eyes snapped open. Not black. Not burning. They were the color of the ice blue sky. And they were furious. With a sound of cracking bone, Kale broke the warrior's wrist. The man screamed as his sword clattered to the stones. Kale was on his feet in a single, fluid motion. He was no longer the dying man. He was the king. Jorin and the other warrior froze, their faces masks of pure terror. You touched her, Kale growled. He did not shout. His voice was a low, lethal vibration. He moved. It was a blur. A flash of black. He did not use the Leakin. He did not need to. He was an alpha. He was a king. And he was angry. He disarmed the second warrior and drove him to his knees. Jorin, the leader, turned and fled, scrambling down the alley. Kale did not follow. He let him go. He stood, breathing hard, his chest heaving. He looked at the cowering warrior on the ground, then at Arya, who was still huddled by the wall. He was healed. He was whole. He was the most powerful being she had ever seen. And then, heavy boots. Riker, the king's commander, rounded the corner with a dozen royal guards, their weapons drawn. With them, his face pale, was the old, silver-haired councilman, Lord Valerius. They all stopped. They saw the king alive and vital. They saw the cowering pack warrior. And they saw the Omega, bruised, her lip bleeding, with her hands still glowing with a faint, residual warmth. Valerius's eyes narrowed. What sorcery is this? He whispered, his voice shaking with what looked like fear, but sounded like hate. She controls the curse. She summons it. She banishes it. She is a witch. Arya flinched. The accusation was a fresh blow. Kale turned. He looked at her. His face was unreadable. The fury was gone, replaced by a deep, profound shock. He had cast her out. He had called her a sin. And she had returned, walking through fire, to save his life. He said nothing. He simply looked at Riker. Get her inside, he commanded, his voice rough. Take her to the healers. Clean her up. And from this moment on, he locked eyes with Lord Valerius. She is not to be touched by anyone. Chapter 14. The King's Claim. The great hall smelled of old stone, beeswax, and fear. Arya stood in the center of the vast, cold floor, alone. She had been cleaned. She wore a simple dress of gray wool, provided by a silent servant. The bruises on her face and arms were a stark, ugly purple against her pale skin. Every noble in the kingdom, every high-ranking warrior, every member of the royal council was there. They lined the walls, their faces a mix of curiosity and open, hostile disgust. Lord Valerius stood before the twin thrones, his silver robes giving him an air of authority. We are gathered, he announced, his voice ringing with false sorrow, to address the infection that has taken root in our court. His eyes, like chips of slate, found Arya. An Omega. A witch. A stain from the Red Moon Pack, just like her mother before her. Murmurs erupted. Her mother. The Queen's killer. She's a spy. Lady Seraphina, the noblewoman who had tried to knife her, stepped forward. My lords. I have seen her magic. She uses it to cloud the king's mind. She controls him. She draws the curse out, and she forces it back. She is playing with his very life. Arya trembled. She wanted to scream. She wanted to tell them they were wrong. But she was an Omega. She was alone. She had no voice here. He protected me, she thought, a tiny, flickering hope. He told them not to touch me. But where was he? This creature, Valerius continued, pointing a long, bony finger at her, is a danger to the bloodline. A danger to the kingdom. She must be cleansed. I, as head of this council, demand her execution. The doors to the great hall boomed open. They did not open slowly. They slammed against the stone walls, the sound like a crack of thunder. Alpha King Kale Draven stood in the doorway. He was not in his simple training clothes. He was in his full, black battle armor. His fur-lined cloak swept the floor behind him. His face was not cold. It was a mask of pure, settled, terrifying rage. The hall went silent. Kale walked. He did not look at the council. He did not look at Seraphina. He walked, his heavy boots echoing, until he was in the center of the floor. He stopped next to Arya. He did not look at her. He faced the council. He faced Valerius. My Lord Valerius. Kale's voice was a low, deadly rumble. You are speaking of my guest? Valerius, for the first time, looked afraid. My king. We are trying to protect you. From her. She is a witch, She is a healer, Kale stated. The words were a shock. But, Your Majesty, her mother, the poison. I am aware, Kale said, his voice dropping even lower, of what the history books say. I am also aware, he turned, his ice blue gaze sweeping the stunned court, of what I have seen. He turned his head, just slightly, to look at Arya. She met his gaze. His eyes were not full of love. They were full of a terrible, new resolve. You speak of my curse, Kale announced to the room. You whisper about the Legion. You fear it. None of you have ever faced it. She has. He pointed at Arya. She faced it in the forest. She faced it in the healer's wing. She faced it in my training yard. And she did not run. He took a step, placing himself slightly in front of her. A shield of black armor. You call her a witch, he growled. You call her a weakness. You are wrong. He looked back at Valerius, his eyes 2 chips of ice. She is not the Omega. She is not the witch. She is Arya. and she is under my personal protection." The court gasped. This was more than an order. This was a declaration. "She answers to me," Kale's voice boomed, "and only to me. Anyone who speaks her name with disrespect will answer to me. Anyone who raises a hand to her will answer to me. Anyone who looks at her wrong," his gaze found Serafina and pinned her, "will answer to me." He was breathing hard, the alpha in him rolling off in waves of possessive, dominant energy. "She is mine." Arya's heart sank and soared. Mine. The word was a chain. The word was a shield. In this court, it was the only thing that could keep her alive. Kale had not defended her honor. He had not cleared her mother's name. He had just claimed his property in front of his entire kingdom. He had chosen her, a broken, stained Omega, over the demands of his ancient council. Lord Valyria stared, his face pale, his mask of loyalty cracking. He saw his power, his control, slipping away. "As you wish, my king," Valyria spat, his voice tight with venom. He bowed. But as he bowed, his eyes, cold and reptilian, met those of another man in the shadows. A high-ranking councilman Arya did not recognize. Valerius gave a tiny, almost invisible, shake of his head. The man nodded once and melted back into the crowd. Kale had won the public battle. But Arya knew, with a sudden, chilling certainty, that Valerius had just started a secret war. Chapter 15. The Whisper in the Library. Being the king's property was a strange and terrifying existence. Arya was moved from her alcove. She was given chambers not grand, but warm, connected to Kale's own through a heavy oak door. Servants who once spat at her now bowed, their eyes wide with fear. Food was brought to her on silver trays. She was, in every way, a prisoner in a much nicer cage. She was also safe. For the first time in her life, she was truly safe. No one dared meet her eyes. No one whispered which as she passed. But the fear for her own life was gone, replaced by a much stronger, much deeper terror. A fear for him. And for his father. She was still Tyrus's caretaker. Ilara, the physician, now treated her as an equal, albeit a frightening one. "His fever is holding," Ilara said one evening, her voice tired. "But the wound does not heal. It is that same, cold." "The ravine sickness," Arya whispered. Ilara's head snapped up. "Where did you hear that name?" "The archives," Arya admitted. "The sickness that killed the queen." Ilara looked away, her face tight. "The king has given you leave to study. Do not let what you find destroy you, child. Some truths are better left buried." But Arya could not let it go. Her mother's name was buried under that lie. She had to dig it up. That night, she went to the royal library. It was different from the archive. This room was for study, filled with medical texts, histories, and astronomical charts. It was vast, dark, and smelled of old leather and dust. She had Kale's personal seal, allowing her access at any time. She was looking for information on poisons. She found a small, dark alcove in the back, hidden behind shelves of ancient scrolls. A single shaft of moonlight cut through the darkness, illuminating the page of the book she was reading. Aconite, it read. Wolfsbane. Causes a wasting sickness. A cold in the blood. A sound. Arya's heart stopped. She doused her candle, plunging the alcove into near total darkness. She held her breath, pressing herself flat against the shelf. Footsteps. Hushed, angry whispers. "He is a fool." The voice was sharp, cultured. It was Lord Valerius. "He claims her. He throws away 1,000 years of pure alpha blood for a stain." "The king is not the problem," a second, deeper voice rumbled. Arya recognized him. Lord Malachar, the man who had nodded to Valerius in the Great Hall. "The king is blinded by her magic. The real problem is the father." Arya's blood went cold. "Tyrus?" "Tyrus," Valerius spat, his voice venomous. He knew the Omega's mother. He liked her. He was the one who investigated the queen's death. He was the one who called it ravine sickness to protect the king from the truth. "What truth?" Malachar growled. "That the queen was not sick." Valerius hissed. "That she was poisoned." Tyrus knew. He was getting too close to us. He was the one who let the Omega escape to the ravine to buy her time. He never believed she did it. Arya's hands flew to her mouth, stifling a gasp. Her mother. Tyrus had helped her mother. And now Malachar said, Tyrus's own wound, it festers. This new Omega, this Arya, she is healing him. Ilara worries he may wake. He cannot wake. Valerius snapped. If he wakes, he clears the mother's name. He clears this Omega's name. And he exposes us. We will be ruined. We will be executed. The blue-eyed rogues failed in the forest, Malachor said. Our first attempt was a failure. Then we will not fail again, Valerius said, his voice turning cold and sharp. The king has given us the perfect opportunity. The festival of the Crimson Moon. Arya trembled. The festival was tomorrow. It is a celebration of his mother's death, Valerius whispered, a cruel smile in his voice. How fitting. Everyone will be distracted. The king will be sentimental weak. We will strike both targets. Both? The father. And the Omega. Valerius's plan was clear. We will finish Tyrus with a poison that cannot be traced. And we will plant the vial on her. The king in his grief will have no choice. He will see her as her mother's daughter. He will execute his new pet. His love will turn to hate. The bloodline will be secure. And our secret, Lord Malachor, will be safe. Forever. A bell tolled in the tower. Midnight. It is time, Valerius said. Go. Get the poison. The festival begins at dawn. The footsteps retreated. The heavy library door groaned shut. Arya sank to the floor, her body shaking so violently she could barely breathe. They were the ones. They had killed the queen. They had framed her mother. And now they were coming for Tyrus. And for her. She had to warn Chaol. She had to save him. True, desperate love had replaced all her fear. The trap was set. Chapter 16, The Festival of Red and Ruin. The Festival of the Crimson Moon was not a celebration. It was a scar. The entire kingdom gathered in the great courtyard. A sea of faces turned toward the high platform. They wore dark reds and grays, the colors of mourning for their lost queen. The air was thick with the scent of spiced wine and a heavy, false solemnity. Arya stood on the platform, just behind Chaol's throne. She was a dark spot in their vision, the Omega he had claimed. She could feel the hatred of 1,000 eyes on her. Chaol was a statue of black armor. He had not spoken to her since the library. He had just commanded. You will stand with me. You will be seen. You will be safe. But she did not feel safe. She felt like a target. Lord Tyrus was there. He was bundled in furs, seated in a heavy oaken chair, looking frail but awake. His amethyst eyes were sharp, and they found Arya's. He gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod. He knew. He was on her side. A tiny, fragile seedling of hope sprouted in her chest. Lord Valerius approached the platform, his silver robes catching the dull light. My king, my people, his voice was sonorous. Today we mark our sorrow. But we also mark our strength. We honor the memory of Queen Alessa. He turned, his gaze falling on Tyrus. And we give thanks to the goddess that our Lord Tyrus, the king's father, has returned to us from the shadows. A polite, strained applause rippled through the crowd. Valerius smiled. Lord Tyrus, the king has requested you be the first to taste the ceremonial wine of memory to honor your wife. A servant in royal livery, his face hidden by a hood, approached Tyrus's chair. He held a single, ornate silver goblet. Arya's blood ran cold. Get the poison. The festival begins at dawn. This was it. No, Arya whispered. But she was too late. The servant was already lifting the goblet to Tyrus's lips. Tyrus, weak but trusting, drink. Chaol, beside her, tensed. Arya? What is it? Tyrus drank. He smiled at Chaol. And then his smile froze. His eyes widened. He grabbed his throat, a terrible, choking, gagging sound ripping from his chest. The silver goblet clattered to the platform. Dark, wine-colored foam bubbled on his lips. Father! Chaol roared, lunging from his throne. Poison! Lady Seraphina screamed from the crowd. He has been poisoned. Tyrus was convulsing. He looked at Arya, his eyes wide with terror, not of her, but for her. He tried to speak. Val. He is trying to warn us. Valerius shouted, his face a mask of false horror. He pointed, not at the servant who was already vanishing into the crowd, but straight at Arya. It was her. She has been at his side for weeks. She finished the job her mother started. No, Arya cried. It was you. I heard you. You and Malachor. The court gasped. Chaol had frozen. He was staring, not at his father, but at Arya. His face was a battlefield of shock, horror, and a terrible, familiar doubt. Valerius seized the moment. She accuses me? She, the witch who controls the king's beast? Look. He strode to Arya and ripped something from her sleeve. A small, dark-colored vial. Arya gasped. She had not felt him plant it. He must have done it when he walked past her, in the confusion. The vial, a noble shouted. She had it. All eyes turned to Chaol. His father was dying, choking on the stones. The entire kingdom was watching. And the Omega he claimed, the daughter of his mother's supposed killer, was standing there with a vial of poison. Kale, Arya begged, tears streaming down her face. You know me? Please. It was him. Kale looked at her. His face was pale, his eyes tortured. He saw his father dying. He saw the vial. He saw his mother's death, his mother's memory, his mother's murderer. And his entire world, his entire bloodline, screamed at him that history was repeating itself. He took a step back. It was just one step. A single, small movement. But it was a verdict. He hesitated. And in his hesitation, he condemned her. The crowd saw it. They saw the king's doubt. She is a murderer. Seraphina shrieked. She has killed the king's father. Valerius raised his hands. The king is in his grief. He cannot make this choice. As head of this council, I will. Seize the witch. Guards grabbed Arya's arms, their grips like iron. Kale started, his voice choked. The law is the law, my king, Valerius said, his voice cold. Even for you. The punishment for regicide is death. By dawn. Arya screamed Kale's name as they dragged her away. He just stood there, a broken statue, watching his father die. Chapter 17. The Gavel and the Guilt. They did not take her to the dungeons. They chained her to a post in the center of the courtyard, a public spectacle. The crowd recoiled, a sea of hateful faces, spitting and throwing refuse. Witch. Killer. Blood traitor. The words struck her, but her eyes were fixed on the platform. Lord Tyrus was dying. Kale was on his knees, clutching his father's fur-clad body. Father, please, Kale begged, his voice a raw, broken sound that carried across the hushed courtyard. The healers. It is too late, my son, Tyrus wheezed. His body was failing, but his eyes were clear. And they were not looking at Kale. They were looking past him. At Arya. She was held fast by two guards, her arms bound. She met his gaze. This was the man who had tried to save her mother. This was the man who knew the truth. Arya. Tyrus whispered. Kale's head snapped up. What? Father, do not speak of her. Save your strength. No, Tyrus insisted. He grabbed Kale's armor, his grip surprisingly strong. You must listen. He is delirious. Lord Valerius shouted, stepping forward. The poison, it. Silence. Kale roared, his fury a tangible thing. He turned back to his father. What father? What about her? Tyrus took a ragged, bubbling breath. He was fighting. He was fighting so hard. Her mother. Alessa. It was not. His eyes rolled, his body spasmed. What? Kale shook him. What was it not? Tell me. It was. Valor. Tyrus choked. Valerius went pale. He took a step toward the dying man, a silver dagger appearing in his hand. But Tyrus's eyes found Arya again. He lifted a single, trembling hand. Not to his son. Not to the man who betrayed him. He reached for her. He was trying to clear her name. He was trying to save her. She is innocent. Tyrus gasped. And then his hand fell. The light in his amethyst eyes went out. He was still. He was gone. Arya screamed, a long, tearing wail of pure despair. The only man who could have saved her. The only man who knew the truth. Dead. The courtyard was silent. A heavy, absolute, stunned silence. Kale stared at his father's body. He did not move. He did not breathe. He just stared. The finality of the act, the loss of the man, the last word, innocent. It all crashed down on him. He had hesitated. He had doubted her. He had let his father die and his mate, be condemned. The guilt was a physical thing. It was a poison, just like the one Valerius had used. Kale's breath hitched. The black veins, the ones Arya had held back, exploded across his skin. They covered his neck, his face. But the lichen did not rise. The beast did not come. The man simply broke. Kale made a sound, a low, animal sound of pure agony. He clutched his own chest. His heart, his soul, his very being was collapsing under the weight of his failure. He was not strong enough to hold the lichen. He was not strong enough to be king. He was not strong enough to save her. He fell. He collapsed, his black armor clattering on the stone, and lay still beside his father. A broken king beside a murdered father. The king has fallen, a woman shrieked. Arya watched, her heart shattering. He had not died. He had just given up. He had chosen his grief over her life. He has succumbed to the witch's curse. Valerius roared, his voice triumphant. He had his dagger. He had his power. Look. She has killed the father and broken the son. She is the curse. Valerius pointed at Arya. Take her to the execution block. No. Arya did not fight. She did not cry. She was numb. She was empty. She was truly, finally alone. The guards dragged her away, and the last thing she saw was the man she loved, unconscious on the ground, leaving her to die. Chapter 18. The Forgiveness at the Block. Dawn was a cruel, gray smear in the sky. The air was cold, sharp with the smell of frost and wet stone. The execution grounds were high on the stronghold's outer wall, overlooking the silent, sleeping kingdom. There was no crowd. Valerius had decreed this be done quickly, quietly. A cleansing before the kingdom awoke to the news of its broken king. Arya was chained to the block. A simple, heavy log of dark wood, stained with history. Her hands were bound behind her. The gray wool dress was thin, and the wind cut through it, but she felt no cold. She felt nothing. She was hollow. Her mother had died in a ravine, hunted and alone. Arya would die on a block, branded a killer. The cycle was complete. Heavy, dragging footsteps echoed on the stone. She looked up. Kale. He was not in his armor. He was in a simple black tunic, his face pale and G_U_NT, like a man who had not slept in a decade. His eyes were not blue. They were dead, gray pits of self-loathing. He was not walking. He was being escorted. Lord Valerius was at his side, a hand on his arm, guiding him. 2 heavy guards flanked him. He was a prisoner, just like her. A prisoner of his title, of his guilt, of his counsel. It is a sad day, my king, Valerius was saying, his voice a sickening, sympathetic drone. But the law is absolute. The kingdom must see strength. It must see justice. You must see justice. Kale's gaze lifted. He saw her. Chained. Small. Alone. His face, which had been a mask of numbness, contorted in a spasm of pure, unadulterated agony. This was his doing. His hesitation. His weakness. He had done this. He had murdered her, just as surely as if he held the axe himself. He tried to speak. His mouth opened, but only a choked, broken sound came out. It is for the best, my king, Valerius said soothingly. The curse is strong. With her gone, your mind will clear. The leakin will settle. Arya looked at him. She looked at Kale. The man she had trained with. The man she had bled for. The man she had saved. The man she loved. And he was watching her die. The executioner, a massive man in a black hood, stepped forward. He checked the chains. He ran his thumb along the edge of his great, silver-headed axe. Kale saw the axe. He flinched. He tried to pull away from his guards. No, he whispered. His voice was a dry, cracked leaf. Please. Majesty, it must be done, Valerius said, his voice hard as steel. Hold him. The guards' grips tightened. Kale was helpless. He was a king who was utterly powerless. He was forced to watch. Arya's gaze met his. Across the cold, gray stone, their eyes locked. His were screaming. They were begging. They were saying, I am sorry. I failed. Forgive me. And Arya, she had no rage left. She had no fear. She only had this vast, empty pity. He was the monster, but he was also the victim. They both were. She gave him the last thing she had to give. She did not cry. She did not curse him. She simply nodded. A small, tiny inclination of her head. And in her eyes, he saw it. It was not anger. It was not hate. It was peace. It was understanding. It was forgiveness. The forgiveness hit him harder than the axe ever could. It was a blade to his soul. He would have preferred she screamed. He would have preferred she cursed his name. But this peace, it was an ending he did not deserve. No, he choked out, louder this time. Arya. The executioner raised the axe. Arya closed her eyes. She felt the wind. She thought of her mother. And Kale roared. It was not a word. It was not a sound of a man. It was the sound of a soul being ripped in two. The sound of a bond, stretched to its absolute limit, finally snapping. His scent. Her scent. The anchor. It was fading. The beast inside him, the one she had calmed, the one he had suppressed, the one his guilt had broken, rose up. It was not a curse. It was a reckoning. And oh, he bellowed. His eyes flashed from gray to solid, molten gold. The Leakin, in its full, untamed, primal fury, exploded to the surface. He threw the guards off him like they were dolls. He was too late. The axe was already falling. Chapter 19. The Lycan's Vow. The axe fell. But it did not find flesh. It found fury. Kale's roar was not a sound. It was a shockwave. It tore the axe from the executioner's hands, sending the man flying backward. Where the king had stood, a new, terrible, and beautiful thing now rose. The Lycan. But this was not the cursed, pained beast from the training yard. This was not the monster fighting for control. This was Kale. It was his rage, his soul, his power, given a physical form. He was 9 feet tall, a creature of midnight fur and shadow, with eyes of pure, molten gold. He was a god of vengeance. He landed on the execution block, shattering the wood. His claws, a foot long and sharp as obsidian, sliced through Aria's chains as if they were thread. Lord Valerius stared, his face a mask of white terror. It cannot be. The curse. There is no curse, Kale's voice rumbled. It was not a man's voice. It was the sound of a storm, of rocks grinding together. He spoke, and the world listened. He looked at Valerius. He saw everything. Aria's forgiveness had not just saved him. It had cleared him. The guilt that his father's death and his mother's memory had piled on his soul, the guilt that Valerius had so carefully built, was gone. And in its absence, the truth was as bright as the dawn. You, Kale growled. Guards. Valerius shrieked, his composure shattering. Kill the monster. He is mad. He is not your king. The guards hesitated, their spears shaking. Kale turned his massive, regal head. I am not a monster, he announced, his voice vibrating in their very bones. I am your king. And this. He pointed a single, lethal claw at Valerius, is the man who murdered your queen. The guards froze. The entire execution ground went silent. He lies. Valerius stammered. 15 years ago, Kale's voice boomed, a terrible sermon of truth. My mother did not die of a sickness. She was poisoned. This man, he took a step, and the stone cracked under his weight, wanted her power. He wanted her influence. He wanted her gone. He was walking now a slow, predatory stalk. He fed her wolfsbane. He created the ravine sickness. And when an Omega healer, Aria's mother, discovered the truth, he framed her. He had her hunted. He had her murdered. Kale was in front of Valerius now, towering over him. The old councilman was shaking, his treachery exposed. You killed my mother, Kale growled, the gold in his eyes burning. You killed my father. You tried to kill her. She is a witch. Valerius screamed, pulling his own dagger. She has poisoned your mind. She is my mate, Kale roared, and the word was a vow. The guards dropped their spears. They fell to their knees. This was not a curse. This was a revelation. I failed my mother, Kale said, his voice a low, terrible promise. I failed my father. He looked back at Aria, who was slumped and pale, but alive. I will not, he vowed, fail her. He turned back to Valerius. Your lies end now. He did not wait for an answer. He did not wait for a guard. He stormed forward, a black shadow of justice, to end the war his mother's killer had started. Chapter 20. The Price of Treason. The execution ground erupted. Valerius, in a final, desperate act of cowardice, grabbed a guard's spear. He is the beast. He is the enemy. For the good of the kingdom, kill him. A few guards, those loyal to Valerius's gold, not their king's blood, raised their weapons. They were a circle of steel between Kale and the true traitor. It was not a fight. It was a culling. Kale moved. He was a blur of shadow and fury. He was the Lycan, but he had the cold, precise mind of the king. He was not a wild beast. He was a general. He was an executioner. He did not kill the guards. He dismantled them. A guard lunged. Kale shattered his spear with one hand and tossed the man into the wall. Another came from the side. Kale's claws flashed, and the man's armor fell away, shredded, his skin untouched. He was disarmed, terrified, and defeated. The sheer, overwhelming power of a true Alpha Lycan, unbound by guilt, was a force of nature. The remaining guards dropped their weapons and fled. Now it was just Kale. And Valerius. You monster, Valerius spat, backing away. He was against the wall, his silver robe stained, his face slick with sweat. I am the monster you created, Kale growled. He advanced, the Lycan form rippling with power. You built your throne of lies on my mother's bones. You used my grief like a shield. She was weak. Valerius shrieked, his sanity snapping. She spoke of peace. Of unity. Your father, they were going to ruin us. I did it for the bloodline. For purity. For power. You did it for you, Kale said. He was close now. He could smell the old man's bitter, terrified scent. Valerius saw his death in the Leakin's golden eyes. He laughed, a high, thin, terrible sound. You win the fight, beast, but you lose the war. Kale paused. What? The axe. Valerius cackled, was just for the show. I am a thorough man. I could not risk the witch surviving. I could not risk you stopping the execution. Kale's golden eyes widened. He looked back at Arya. She was not moving. She was slumped against the wall, her chains broken. She was pale. So very pale. I had her poisoned, just like her mother, Valerius whispered, his face triumphant. The same poison. It is already in her veins. It is done. A rage deeper and darker than anything he had ever felt consumed Kale. He did not roar. He did not speak. He simply raised his clawed hand. Valerius stopped laughing. My mother. Kale's voice was a dead, cold whisper. Sends her regards. It was fast. It was final. The treason was over. Kale spun. He was at Arya's side in a single bound. The Leakin form melted away from him, hissing like steam. The man, the king, the terrified mate, fell to his knees beside her. Arya, he begged. He touched her face. She was cold. A thin, dark line of foam, just like his father's, was at the corner of her mouth. No, he whispered. No. I was not too late. I was not too late. He scooped her into his arms. She was light. Too light. Her head lolled back. Her eyes were closed. He had saved her from the blade. He had saved her from the traitors. He had avenged his mother. But he was losing her. He held his lover in his arms, her life slipping away, and he realized the poison was not just in her. It was in him. He had won his kingdom and lost his world. Chapter 21. The Crimson Bargain. Kale knelt on the stone, his kingdom silent around him. The sun was rising, a weak, gray light. It painted the execution ground in the colors of death. The guards were gone. The traitors were dead. He was alone, and Arya was a cold, fading weight in his arms. Arya, he whispered, his voice breaking. He brushed the hair from her face. Her skin was like marble. He put his ear to her chest. Nothing. No. A beat. A single, faint, struggling thump. And then, silence. No, he said. It was not a plea. It was a denial. You do not get to leave me. I did not fight for this. I did not find you, just to lose you. He was the king. He had armies. He had power. He had a kingdom. And it was all worthless. It was ash. He could not command her to live. He could not force her heart to beat. He looked up. The sky was gray, the clouds heavy. The moon, a pale sliver, was still visible. Goddess, he choked out. His voice was raw. This was not a king's command. It was a wolf's howl. You did this, he accused the sky. You gave me the bond. You showed me my mate. You made her my salvation. And now you take her? Was this a test? Was this a joke? The wind was his only answer. He bowed his head, his shoulders shaking. The Alpha King, the Leakin, the warrior. He was just a man. A man who was broken. Take me, he whispered, pressing his forehead to hers. Her skin was so cold. Do you hear me, goddess? Take me. You want a life? Take mine. It is yours. He was desperate. He was bargaining with a silent sky. I will give up my crown. I will give up my power. I will give up my life, he said, his voice gaining a raw, terrible strength. She is an omega. She is pure. I am a killer. I am a monster. It is not a fair trade, but it is the only one I have. He closed his eyes, pouring all his energy, all his life, all his alpha power into the bond. He did not know how. He just gave. Take it. All of it. Just let her live. Arya's body in his arms was still. Kale's heart shattered. He had failed. And then, a jolt. It was not from her. It was from him. The bond. The thread that had connected them, the one that had snapped. It was still there, thin as a spider silk. He felt it ignite. He felt a pull. A giving. And then a taking. He gasped, a sharp, sudden pain in his chest. It felt like his soul was being ripped out. He looked at Arya. A single, pained breath escaped her lips. His heart stopped. Arya? He looked up at the sky. The gray clouds were parting. The pale sliver of the moon was visible. But it was not pale. A shadow was creeping across its face. A shadow the color of wine. The color of blood. The moon was turning crimson. The bargain had been heard. And the goddess, in her terrible silence, was accepting his terms. Chapter 22. The Mark of a Dying Breath. Kale knelt on the cold stone of the execution grounds, his bargain screamed at the silent, crimson moon. He was the Alpha King, a being of absolute power, and he had never felt so utterly helpless. He was giving his life, his soul, his power, all of it, into the invisible, ethereal bond, trying to force it into her. He was trying to trade his life for hers. "Arya," he begged, his voice a raw, broken thing. He pressed his face into her cold, still hair. "Arya, fight. You did not come this far. You did not save me from myself. You did not forgive me. You cannot leave me now." He felt the poison in her. It was a cold, creeping void. His own life force, his alpha power, was a torrent of heat, but it was pouring into a bottomless ocean. It was not enough. The bargain was not working. "Please," he wept. It was a sound he had never made. It was the sound of a king's final surrender. "I love you. I love you." He felt it. A flicker. A tremor so faint passed through her body. Her eyelids fluttered. She was fighting. Somewhere in the deep, dark place where the poison had taken her, she had heard him. Her eyes opened. Just a slit. They were milky, unfocused, staring through him. She was on the edge, one foot in his world, one in the next. "Kale," she breathed. The word was not a sound. It was the memory of a sound. She saw him. She saw his face, twisted in agony. She saw the bargain he was making. She saw his life force, his bright, silver power, draining from him into her, and she saw it was failing. He was killing himself for nothing. "No," she whispered. With a strength that was not of this world, a strength born in the heart of a true Luna, she moved. It was an agonizing, impossible effort. She lifted her head from his lap, just an inch. Keel stared, his breath caught in his throat. "Not your life," she gasped, her voice frail as a moth's wing. "Ours." She surged upward. It was the last ounce of life she had. She was not a warrior. She was not a fighter. But she was a mate. She marked him. It was not a claim. It was not a bite of dominance. It was a fusion. Her teeth, sharp and desperate, sank into the side of his neck, right over the pulse that was fading for her. The second her mark was made, the bond exploded. It was not a bargain. It was a supernova. Kale roared, a sound of agony and pure, undiluted ecstasy. A column of light, silver and gold, erupted from the point of contact, shooting into the crimson sky. The curse. The black, oily, parasitic thing he had carried his entire life. The monster he thought was him. It was incinerated. It was torn from his soul, burned away in the white-hot fire of a true mate bond. His power, her healing, his alpha, her omega, they slammed together, reformed, and became one. But the poison was still there. The effort was too much. Arya pulled back. Her face, which had been contorted in effort, went smooth. Her eyes, for one perfect, breathtaking second, were clear. They were blue. She saw him. The real him. The man she had saved. And she smiled. Then, her body went limp. Her head fell back, her arms sliding from his chest. She was still. The warmth, the light, the life, it was gone. "Arya?" Kale whispered, the curse gone, but his soul now a hollow, echoing cavern. "Arya." "No. No, the curse is gone. We are free. Open your eyes." She was dead. He had healed his soul, but lost his heart. The price had been paid. Just not by him. He threw his head back, and a howl tore from his throat. It was not a roar of a Leakin. It was the sound of a man who had lost his entire universe. The crimson moon above him flared, as if angered by his grief. A single, intense beam of bloody light, a spotlight from the heavens, cut through the dawn. It bypassed him. It bypassed the dead traitors. It struck Arya. It enveloped her, a cocoon of red, divine light. Kale watched, his howl dying. A gasp. It was not his. Arya's body, bathed in that red light, arched. It was a violent, agonizing, beautiful thing. A single, shuddering breath ripped into her lungs. Her eyes flew open. They were not blue. They were not milky. They were the color of the Leakins. They were pure, molten gold. Chapter 23. The Kneeling Kingdom. Kale stared, his mind unable to comprehend the sight. His heart, which had been a dead stone in his chest, gave a single, painful thump. Arya? Her golden eyes, bright as twin suns, blinked. They were wild, full of the moon's power. Then, they found him. They focused. The wildness softened. The brilliant gold swirled, and the deep, Familiar blue of her soul bled back in, mixing, creating a new color. Eyes of sapphire and sunlight. Kale, she whispered. Her voice. It was not the frail, hesitant voice of the Omega from the infirmary. It was deep, rich, and resonant. It held the power of the woman who had walked through death and come back. He did not speak. He could not. The Alpha King, the Leakin, the man who had faced down an army he shattered. He did what he had not done since he was a child. He wept. He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair, and a great, shuddering sob of pure, unadulterated relief tore through him. He was a king, but he was just a man, and he was holding his entire world. You are here, he choked out, his voice thick. You are real. You are warm. I am here, she whispered back, her arms, now strong, wrapping around his back, holding him. We are here. You are light. He pulled back, confused. What? The curse, she said, her fingers tracing the new, silver blue of his eyes. It's gone. I cannot feel the shadow. He was about to answer when he heard it. The scrape of armor on stone. The gasp of warriors. He looked up. Riker. Alara. Lady Seraphina. And the entire remaining court, drawn by his howl, were spilling onto the execution grounds. They stopped, frozen, at the sight. They saw their dead traitor, Lord Valerius. They saw their king, Kale, alive and unmarked, kneeling on the stones. And they saw the Omega, Arya, glowing in his arms. She was not the same woman. The invisible, gray Omega was gone. This was a queen. A quiet, terrifying power rolled off her in waves, a golden aura that warmed the cold dawn air. It was a presence that perfectly matched the new, clear, silver light radiating from Kale. The bond between them was no longer a secret. It was a tangible thing, a visible force that shimmered in the air. Lady Seraphina's face, pale with shock, twisted. What is she? Riker, the king's commander, the hardest wolf in the kingdom, simply stared. He saw his king, not cold and cursed, but whole. He saw the woman who had done it. She is Luna, he breathed. He was the first. He dropped to one knee, his head bowed, his fist slamming over his heart in the ultimate salute. Alara, the physician, was next. She saw the impossible. She saw life from death. She saw a healing she could not explain. She did not see a witch. She saw a miracle. She knelt. One by one, the guards, the nobles, their fear of the witch replaced by a new, profound awe of the Luna, they all went down. Even Seraphina, her face white with terror and understanding, sank to her knees. The entire kingdom. Kneeling. Kale looked at this. He looked at his world on its knees, not in fear of him, but in reverence for her. For their bond. He rose to his feet, pulling Arya gently up with him. She was weak, but she stood tall, her hand in his. Kale looked at his court. You have knelt for a bloodline, he said, his voice clear, strong, and free of the old, cold gravel. You have knelt for tradition. You have knelt for fear. Today, you kneel for love. He turned to Arya. His face, for so long a mask of ice, was just open. It was a face she had never seen. It was just Kale. He reached up. Not for his sword. Not for her. He reached for the heavy, silver circlet of the Alpha King. The crown of his isolation. He lifted it from his own head. The court gasped. He got down on one knee. The king. Before his mate. Before his people. This, he said, his voice thick, was a crown of ice. It was the mark of my curse. He held it out to her. He gently, with hands that trembled, placed the circlet on her head. It settled in her dark hair, a perfect fit. You, he said, his silver blue eyes locking with her blue gold ones, have made it a crown of life. You are my salvation. You are my queen. You are my Luna. Chapter 24. The Strength of an Omega. The Kingdom of the Leakin healed. It was not a fast process. It was slow, and it was painful, like a bone resetting. The shadows of Valerius's betrayal were long, but the light that now shone from the throne room was brighter. There were two thrones. One, the ancient, black iron seat of the Alpha King. Beside it, a new one, carved from the white heartwood of the forest, its lines strong and graceful. They ruled together. Arya sat on her throne, Kale on his, as Riker dragged a final, snarling figure into the great hall. It was Lyra, the enforcer from the Red Moon Pack, found guilty of conspiring with Jorin. Lyra spat on the marble floor. So, this is it. The Omega plays queen. She sneered at Arya. You are still just a pet. You are still just a weak, pathetic. Kale was on his feet in a flash, a low, warning growl building in his chest. The old king, the king of ice, was not gone. He was just controlled. But Arya did not flinch. She simply raised a hand. Kale stopped. He looked at her. He trusted her. He sat. Arya's gaze, that new, clear, blue-gold gaze, settled on Lyra. I am an Omega, she said. Her voice was not loud, but it filled the hall, silencing every whisper. You are right. Lyra faltered, her sneer wavering. This was not the reaction she expected. I was raised, just like you, Arya continued, her voice clear and calm, to believe that strength was in a fist. In a title. In a snarl. I was taught that compassion was weakness. I was taught that to heal, to feel, to love, was a flaw. She rose from her throne. She did not glide. She walked. She walked down the steps, her simple, royal blue dress a stark contrast to Kale's black armor. She stopped directly in front of the bound enforcer. You define strength by who you could break, Arya said, her voice dropping, but her intensity pinning Lyra to the spot. You were wrong. True strength is defined by who you can heal. She looked at Kale. This kingdom, this world, is not healing because of a new law. It is healing because we are no longer afraid to be whole. She turned back to Lyra. The enforcer was trembling. You will not be executed, Arya said. Lyra's head snapped up. You will be retaught. You are sentenced to 1 year of service. In the infirmary. You will learn to clean the wounds you helped create. You will learn, enforcer, what real strength looks like. It was a judgment that was both a mercy and a terrible, precise punishment. Later. The moon was full, a brilliant, silver-white orb in the sky. The throne room was empty, save for the two of them. Arya stood on the great balcony, a place she once looked at in fear, and watched her new, healing kingdom sleep. She had gone from a girl who was afraid of her own shadow to a woman who had taught a nation what it meant to be strong. Kale came up behind her. He did not touch her, not at first. He just stood with her, breathing in the same, peaceful air. It is quiet, she murmured. It is at peace, he replied. His voice, once a cold weapon, was now just a man's. Warm. Real. She turned to him. And you? Are you? Kale looked at her. His mate. His queen. His savior. The woman who had walked through the fire of his curse and the ice of his heart. The woman who had died for him. The woman who had lived for him. He did not answer with words. He moved, and he sank. He got down on one knee. Not as a king to his queen. Not as a subject to his ruler. But as a man before his very soul. He took her hand, the hand of a healer, the hand that had calmed his beast, the hand that had saved his life, and he pressed it to his lips. Arya's eyes, the color of the sky and the sun, filled with tears. Kale looked up at her, his own silver blue eyes shining with a devotion so pure, so absolute, it was the most powerful force in the kingdom. He whispered the words that were the new law, the new truth, the final vow. You saved my father. You saved me. But most of all, you taught a king how to love.